Okay, so here I am with Struggle of Empires, and I see I screwed up at least one rule. Always the case, right? In this case, at one point I mentioned the chance of getting to a colony is something like 1/3. That's not the case. It's 1/3 of 1/6, which would be 1/18. You roll a die on a 1, then you re-roll, and you only make it on a 5 or a 6. On a 1 or a 2, I think you're sunk. On a 3 or 4, you have to stay in Europe. Big difference there, because it means that colonial expansion is reasonably likely to happen. Okay. So beyond that, let's see. I've gotten through the setup stage. All the players have put their pieces on the map, and this was done in counterclockwise order. Normally it would be done clockwise, but I always do things weird. Just, I don't know. It's always been the way I play solitaire games, always counterclockwise. Helps remind me that I'm not playing with someone because, there's so many voices in my head. I think that there's other people here. Okay. So let's look at what the French did first, because they had to place first. They put a fort in North America because they have 2 control markers there. They want to hold their presence there. There's only 2 other markers, so as long as they hold this, they're going to get the full value. And they say, that's good, whatever happens, that's good. Over in South America, they're looking to expand, however. It's worth more, and they put a couple armies and a navy there. And they threw an army over in the East Indies and ended up the only person there to put an army there. And they're planning on perhaps grabbing that away from Britain. Their initial thought wasn't really that, but right now they're looking at, hey, if I can get away with that, why not? It's going to be harder to get that army out of there, perhaps. What they did leave alone, though, was Central Europe. They had such a presence in the colonial areas that their presence in Central Europe, and indeed their presence throughout the European theater, seemed of minimal importance at this point. What I didn't do was pay a lot of attention to the extra counters. So, for example, somebody should be going for India, but nobody did. And I think that's a mistake, and I'm guessing somebody's going to play for it as they get a better feel during the war. That's just too big a plum to be able to grab a 1-point combat area and take a 5 victory point area that easily. Let's go to the next player, who's the Brits. Unlike the real Brits, yes, they had a presence in the East Indies, but they decided to ignore that and went big in Europe. In the German states, Central Europe, and the Baltic, they had pieces up there. They actually played a fortress and 2 armies in the German states. They have no navies whatsoever. They're completely interested in the North German and Central European theaters there with this. Hey, there's a lot of points there. If we go big, maybe we'll win big, right? Next we go to the Spaniards, who could have gone with kind of a mixed strategy because they had a couple of pieces in the Americas, but instead they too chose to go into Europe, fortified themselves in the German states, moving towards Central Europe with the greatest power there, and they also jumped into the Ottoman Empire region, hoping to at least maintain the top place there. It's a low-value area. I figure they can probably keep it. Next, I guess it's the United Provinces. They didn't place any pieces. Okay. Let me try to ignore the other pieces I've put on the board. See, they've got a mixed position here. They don't feel like they can really compete too hard for those German states. But putting a fortress in there might be worth a lot of points. We'll see. The Baltics, right now they're tied with everyone else. They're going to put a fortress up in the Baltics too. The play guide suggests not going heavy on fortresses, but now it gives me 3 pieces to contest over here. I'm not going to put them here because that was really kind of heavily decided. I will place a fleet here and an army in each. Not necessarily the wisest moves, but Actually, I'm going to put the fleet down in South America to allow me to transfer troops there more easily. Okay. Now, one thing that's not for directly implied in the rules, and I'm assuming it's forbidden, is moving between, say, the Caribbean and South America, or North America and the Caribbean. There's implication that you can't do that by land. Unlike in Europe, where you can transfer between land areas, in the Americas, it seems to be that you can only operate if you have a navy in the area. So I couldn't move from the Caribbean to South America without this navy here. I don't have to make a roll for that because it doesn't have one of these ropes. It's got these purple lines separating. It's the only area that has that kind of sea zones. Okay, let's go on to the Austrians, who went next. And they did go for a mixed strategy, no question here. We just did a mixed strategy with the Dutch. But the Austrians looked at their Central America, their Caribbean presence, and said, I've got the slaves. If I put a fleet here in Africa, I can bring the slaves over and help protect my presence there, and put a heavy presence here in the German states for that value with an army and a fortress. I still think fortresses are probably the way to go if you want to try to hold what you've got. And it looks like things like the German states are worth holding. We'll see, whether I learn something that correlates with what the suggestions in the rules give. Russia also went with kind of a mixed strategy. They're looking at the Mediterranean. It was all open. So they jumped in there. They jumped in the Ottoman Empire to help defend their position there. High value, low value area. A light investment might seem worthwhile. And then they placed themselves in the Caribbean, directly challenging, but they already have 2 tokens there. And they thought that would help. They might be able to move influence down into South America if need be. They also put a piece in Africa. Now this is the absolute challenge to the Austrians. They want to make sure they hold the Caribbean, so they're going to go for the slaves as well. People are looking at the possibility of using a blockade ship, which stops sea movement or gives you +2 to naval support. You put this under your fleet, you force a naval battle to be able to land troops there. Somebody has to actually, maybe not a naval battle, they have to have more troops. I'm not sure. Let's look at the blockade ship. Yeah, they have to have more naval troops than you do. And if they defeat your navy, the marker's removed. So that kind of allows them an option, maybe, if they can get that counter. But there may be other people who want it, like, say, the Austrians. And it'll end up being the order of play that determines who gets to grab a valuable chit first. The chits that they suggest in the play aid or whatever, in the game suggestions, are all pretty much ones that you get to trigger every war, once a war. Those are nice options. Things like, not so much the improved agriculture as much, but things like press gangs that allow you to tap the counter, as it were, to get a free navy or a free army or a free ally, an extra attempt to buy an extra counter purchase on an ally or something like that. Nice little counters that would be worth a lot less if you bought them later in the game. I'm not sure whether they are the most valuable to take first off. I've seen that's the planning route, right? I want to take this and get the most I can out of it. But on the other hand, I would guess in most games like this that there's almost always a good aggressive strategy that doesn't involve that building up. Some games it's not the case. Okay, and that's the Russians, and then we go to the Prussians, and they place themselves again with a mixed strategy, going in to protect their holdings in Central Europe, the Baltic, and even the Mediterranean, where they dropped a fort, and also kind of putting some protection in their North American holdings. They kind of feel boned by how spread out they are. they didn't get sort of this locus that they really needed to defend. So they feel like they're going to probably lose one of their edge pieces. They're just not sure what to do. All right, so now we're going to go into the bidding on alliances and see how I handle that. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that on camera. So I'm going to try to work through my reasoning on the bidding, at least a little bit on this first turn. Never do this again, I'm sure. It's going to be a tedious exercise. But France looks and says, you know, I kind of want to take Britain out of here. Why? I don't know. They just do. So they've got a zero bid. They looked around trying to decide where they wanted to go, and they decided they would put England on their other side because they think that's going to be an easier fight. Now, it may not be all that easy because you're still rolling 2 dice against each other, and they only have a +1 for their military. So I don't know how truly valuable that is, but they've decided to do that. England, they're not really terribly opposed to this. Now, the question here is there something they want to get a jump on? And I can't think of something. They'd like to get one of those early plays, but they're in the early placement. France is already putting them there. So it's totally acceptable to England. They don't really care who they end up allied with. Maybe they can bid and control that a little later. We've got a Spain. How does Spain feel about this? Spain would like to go earlier. So I'm going to make a roll, see if they go in. And they're gonna bid a buck. And I'm going to have to pause because I've got this bag still sealed. Okay, so I wanted to also check a rule there, which is the next first bid is going to be England's. How much that means, I'm not sure. I kind of was hoping the person to the left or the person who gets the bid, or right in my case, would be getting the next bid, because that way I wouldn't have to try to keep track of that. As it stands, 4 people are going to get first bids, whatever that means. I don't know that that's a terrible advantage. Anyway, Spain is going to bid 1, and they're going to change England out for themselves. The reason they want France in there is in Central Europe, France is empty. That's one of the places that they want to gain from. So they're thinking that would be cool. Now we go to the Dutch, and the Dutch don't really feel very warlike. They don't want to bid at this point terribly much. They don't really have a lot. The only thing they're kind of hoping is to maybe choose alliances where they won't get hammered, because they're spread out pretty far. They've got a lot of defensive strength here, so they don't mind if they end up, say, fighting Prussia or England or one of the European powers. They don't really want to end up fighting most of the North American powers. They're not going to bid on this because they want to wait and see. Maybe it'll be more valuable which alliance they're in. Over to Austria. Austria's thinking, wow, there's certain, and Spain was thinking this too, there's certain things that would be useful to go early to get a good pick in terms of just what order do we go in? Good question. Yeah, so I'm guessing, and it's not clear, the player actions, the order is shown by the position of each player's token. Maybe, my assumption is, yeah, it's got numbers there. So it's that it's going to fall like that, where, and 7th and 8th are really the same thing, no matter what, because only one token will be there. So Austria's question is, do they want to go early? And I'm going to roll for them to see. They kind of do. I think a $2 bid is not an unreasonable one. I'll make that bid. And I believe that relieves Spain of their bid. And what does Austria want to do? Well, they want to place themselves in, but is there anyone they terribly want to go against? I'm not really convinced they want to bid. They're going to hold off their bid. They also are seeing maybe more flexibility to knowing who's where. Let's go to Russia. So does Russia want to make a bid of at least $2? They're also in that let's wait and see position. Prussia? Prussia does not see anywhere they particularly want to go. So now we come back to France. Now, did France really want this? No, they're fine. Yeah, they're going to be opposed to Spain, and that's their European situation, but they can live with attacking Spain instead of England. No big deal there. And they can always move England in, maybe for a cheap bid some other point. So they're willing to pass. Question here is England really interested? And England had already passed before. They decided against. They didn't put a bid in. So I'm going to say Spain got the first bid, paid $1, and they have set the alliances as primarily France and Spain. Now, the play on the bidding goes next to the English. They get the next choice. Now, in between wars, when it switches between wars, the first bidder is going to be whoever played last. So you could definitely see that certain people's stance in the game and position could change the bidding significantly. I'm going to pull out right now, I think, what the English probably want to set something up, and I'm not sure what their bidding is going to be. So I'm going to play through the bidding, and I'll come back after it and explain maybe in a brief why the bids fell the way they did. Well, actually I lied, of course. Wanted to explain this particular decision here. England didn't want to play their own. They'd kind of like an early tile pick, but they're also thinking it would be cool to control the alliances. How can they do that? They can put a proposal out, especially if they're bidding 0 on it. It's probably not going to stand anyway. So they picked Austria and the Netherlands, putting Austria up against Spain, who are kind of situated to maybe take pressure off one another. And the Netherlands also against Austria. Their goal here is to kind of play people off of each other, to create friction in the European theater so that the English can maybe go and do their own thing safely. We'll see how that works out. Spain is already bid in. They're not terribly upset about this idea, so they're going to pass. I'm not sure how the Netherlands feels about this. They're getting an early pick, so they probably will pass as well. That puts us to Austria, also getting an early pick. No objections there, to tell you the truth. If they're forced to fight against the Spanish and the Dutch, they're going to have to be in a war with someone. So what the heck? So now we come to Russia, who wasn't terribly interested on their own. They'll pass. Same with Prussia and France. They don't mind this. England gets theirs for free, actually. Now the next pick is the Spaniards. What do they want to do? Well, they're seeing themselves against Austria and France. France, no big deal. They're going to lose down here. They're counting on that anyway. But what about Austria? Well, they want to pick England, who's the power, or another power in Europe, to face on their side, to have on their side for this. And now they want to look at, how about somebody they don't really care about? Somebody who's not European or not involved in their theater. Who could that be? Well, there aren't a lot of options left. Prussia looks weak against Spain, and this is Spain's pick. They'll take Prussia. And let's see how people react to this. How do the Dutch feel about having the British on their side? Hey, bonus. No objection there. How do the Austrians feel about this? They're not too thrilled. They feel like they've just been herded into a battle that maybe isn't optimal for them. They're sharing control with this. So I'm going to actually roll for Austria because I think they're willing to bid on this. They don't feel terribly happy about leaving this. I'm going to roll again. They're going to bid 1. It's a cheap price to control a pick. So what are they going to do? Well, they would rather have Britain on their side. And who's the opponent that they're going to pick? Well, I don't really want to be against Russia. That doesn't seem good. Is Prussia as good for Austria? Prussia's not a great choice either. We got to pick someone though, right? And we've already seen everyone there has been picked, so it's really between Russia and Prussia. I'll let Prussia sit up there. And now we're at the point where people may want to bid just to prevent things. How does Russia feel about this? Well, they feel pretty good. They're going to be in the last choice, which means they might be able to just pay a buck and pick their own alliance. What do they care about these other deals? They're not going to bid in on this. Let's go to Prussia. How do they feel about it? They're going to be facing France and Austria. Doesn't sound terrible to them. They don't see anything awful about it. It puts them allied with Spain, who's kind of the power here. It puts them allied with the Dutch, who they're going to have trouble dealing with. They're good on this. The French, do they care? Well, it's throwing Prussia against them. That's not that big a deal. They're defended against Prussia here. They're good with this. On to the Brits. How do they feel about fighting Prussia? Or more importantly, how do they feel about fighting Spain and the Netherlands? Again, they've got to go against someone. They're not going to bid on it. Now we're to the person who made the original choice and is not terribly thrilled with this choice. And here's the question. Is it worth $2 to get England out of this? They got their first placement for free there. And they're actually going to go to $2 to switch this back again. And again, nobody cares except them and Austria. And Austria was hesitant about putting the buck in. They're going to withdraw and let Spain choose that alliance. And now the Dutch have the last choice. And they have the Russian piece to choose. Where do they want to put it? Well, Russia's a definite possible competitor for them here. But Russia has a couple of pieces. We've got Prussia to take out, and I've already got them to fight. Where else are Dutch involved? We're fighting the French. We got enough problems. We're going to take the Russians as an ally. Does Austria care about this? Not terribly. They've already got France, or they've already got Spain as a problem here. They'll live with it. Big question, how does Russia feel about where they've gotten shunted? Is that what they want? Do they want to be fighting Prussia, Austria, and France? And they don't really see a reason not to. It's kind of cool because it gives them the Austrian situation. It gives them Prussia here if they have that kind of force. They're good with it. Look at other people. How does France feel about a Prussian war or a Russian war? They've got Prussia on their side. France doesn't care. England is fine with having Prussia on their side or Russia on their side. They guess they've got plenty of countries to fight. We come back to Spain. They're fine with having an ally of Russia. That one passes. So that's our player, both order and alliances. We've got a Franco-Austrian and Prussian alliance against Spain, Netherlands, England, and Russia. Yeah, maybe that would happen. We certainly saw some alliances in this general time period between Prussia and Austria, at least where Prussia didn't get itself involved in Austria's deals. But, this is not really a historical game at all. And in fact, this alliance mechanism does a nice thing by balancing things, but it doesn't really try to take into account the real historical reasons for making these deals, as opposed to a balance of power and the victory points. It's a little weird. Okay, this one goes.